Well, as kids, they're in and out of the business. They hang around and do little chores, sit in the office. Matt and Mark would fool around on the saws and just became interested in the business, helping out, being around it.
Well, my earliest memory was when I was about 13, and I came home from school, and I walked into the garage, and there's my dad at a saw, cutting something. I had no idea what he was doing. And so I'm like, what's up with this? And he told me he was cutting picture frames, and I just thought it was the weirdest thing I ever heard of. My first job was to file the ends of metal picture frames so that they were smooth.
I remember my dad starting his new business, just having me haul boxes. I didn't really know what they were for, but they were heavy. And, I was, his oldest son, so I was there to help, lucky me. So we'd have all these boxes and he'd bring them over to the house. He had some sort of storage place. That's what I remember anyway.
In the wintertime, he decided that I'm going to start selling some picture frames. And so what he did, he brought his supplies home. He built himself a little shop in the garage, hung up a carpet on the wall to block out the sound from the neighbors, and set up a saw and just started chopping frames there. So that's my earliest memories of my father in the business.
When I was in high school, after I learned how to drive, I would drive over here in my uniform. I wore uniforms back then. My father had me answering phones and filing and just doing office work.
They all eventually, as they grew, went their own way, but then became interested in coming back and doing something a little more seriously in the business.
After I graduated from college, I moved to Tennessee, and I was a video manager. It was interesting. It was a different experience than I've ever been used to. But I didn't like being by myself down there. I didn't have any family or friends there. So I called my dad up and I said, "Dad, do you have anything for me? I want to come back." And he said, "Sure, you can do the books." When I was a kid, I always saved money. I was very good with financially. And so he thought this would be a good job for me to start out in. So I came back, I answered phones, I worked the showroom, and I also learned how to balance the books, write checks, things like that. And then as I started developing my skills, then he realized, well, you can do a lot more than what I'm asking you to do. And I then went back to school and got my MBA from University of Toledo because I didn't want to not have that background and just do books. I wanted to do more than that.
Pettit Career Center is a fine school here in Northwest Ohio. They gave me the opportunity to go to school and work at the same time. So I took advantage of that. What I did is I went to school, once again, half a day. In the afternoon, I'd come here and I would cut frames. We called it the cut and buff. So I'd cut frames and we'd buff the burr off the edge of the frames. Did that for, I don't know, 3 to 4 years. I went off on my own to open up my own business, which was a tanning salon. It was a wonderful business, but it was rough. The summer times I sat there with nothing to do. Everybody was out in the sun. Business was tough. So I talked to my father, and he suggested, why don't you come back to American Frame, and you can run the showroom. I was like, fantastic. I used to run the showroom when I was a child.
They use me for when they need me. And there was times I did work here, as frame cutter. I had an office job, sort of an office job for a while here. But nothing ever really suited me because I'm such a musician, going my own way, just like my dad. I don't know if radio advertisement ever really worked for him, but he wanted to give it a go here in town and have me do the music. I think it was more of a favor to me, and it did play for a while. And I thought it was a good jingle, it was catchy, but I don't know how much business it brought in. Do it yourself, come on and do it yourself. The frames from American Frame. Down in the heart of the Arrowhead Park. Call now and request a catalog. Something like that. 893-5595. 893-5595. 24 hours on the telephone line. American Frame, American Frame. That's kind of how it went.
I had left for a long time, and I went to school out west and worked down in Texas for a while with Owens Corning. I left the company in '85, moved to San Francisco, got into the telecommunications industry. It was late '80s, early '90s, and I just had my first child. I was working for Sprint at the time. I was in technical support for national accounts. And on my daughter's first birthday, she wasn't really interested in me. She was more interested in the babysitter. And that night, I started thinking, you know, I can't do this anymore. This is not for me. I need to be able to work and raise my kid. So I called my dad, because I'd been thinking about the company and had some ideas for the company. And he said, okay, write it up. Submitted a business plan, and he hired me. Basically, my idea was to take the company from only doing do-it-yourself custom picture framing kits to actually doing finished framing for companies. One of my first clients was Sprint Communications. When I resigned, they were doing this program called Total Quality Management. They needed them framed. So I said, well, let me handle that for you. And so the company I'd left became our first commercial client, and we've grown from there, obviously. Well, what happened eventually was that the job became big, and it wasn't something that I felt I could manage remotely anymore. I had to make a decision. So my husband was traveling a lot on business, and I decided, well, he can fly out of any airport. So we made the decision that I would move back and help run the family business and grow the commercial department, and also get involved in other aspects of marketing. I believe I moved back in 2000, January of 2000. And so that's when we really started working together closely as a team here at American Frame.
I didn't find it fascinating to just write checks and balance books. I wanted to do something else. Our product line intrigued me, and I just started being nosy and just asking questions about the catalog. Why do we do it this way? And again, as I was developing more skills, my father, he saw that in me and said, well, you know, why don't you try your hand at this? We didn't even have a catalog. We had product sheets in those days. My father had an idea of a handbook style catalog, just a small catalog that could fit in the hands of people. I said, well, why don't we call it a handbook? So we went with that concept of a handbook, and a handbook has it's more of a learning tool. One of the barriers to people purchasing from us is, oh gosh, I can't put together a frame myself. So we wanted to take away that barrier and become more of a teacher. And that was pretty new at that time, and especially in our industry, we weren't seeing that.
Bill Goodyear is our marketing director, and he decided to start shooting products himself. So he went out and bought a small camera, and he wasn't having much success with it. Well, geez, when I was a kid, that was my hobby. My father bought me my first camera in '78, a Nikon FE. It was a passion of mine. My family knew that I could take pictures, so they asked me to help Bill out. Well, once I got that camera in my hand, I just started going with it and saying, hey, look, you know, why don't I start shooting the product? They're like, can you do that? Can you shoot these product shots? They didn't believe I could do it, so I proved it by starting taking pictures of the products in the back of the showroom as I was working in the showroom. After a while, my photography surpassed what we were hiring out, and I became very proud of what I was doing. And so it expanded into other areas of American Frame. So after a while, I was handling all the photography.
My role with the company has evolved quite a bit since I first started, because the web has changed everything, as you can imagine. What I do now is, you know, of course, we're still involved with commercial sales and client relations there, but I'm also in charge of web content, customer education, product selection, pricing. We first launched the website, I believe, in 2002, 2003 timeframe. Oh my gosh, it was just this simple site that showed the frames, and it wasn't e-commerce enabled. It was basically to say, hello, we're here, call us and ask for a catalog, or email and ask for a catalog if you want one. We're always interested in the next thing, and it was exciting to see that we could actually start designing a website that would place orders online so that we weren't limited to our daytime hours.